Have you ever felt like you're falling behind? Not physically, not in a race, but in life? Perhaps you opened your phone one morning, and within a few minutes, you saw someone getting married, someone buying a house, someone starting a business, someone traveling the world, someone celebrating a promotion, and suddenly, a normal day began to feel different. Not because your life changed, because your perspective changed. Now a question appeared. A quiet question. A dangerous question. Am I falling behind? Think about that. How many times have you asked yourself that question? Perhaps more than you realize. Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like you to imagine something. Imagine arriving at a stadium. Thousands of people are running. Some are sprinting. Some are jogging. Some are walking. Everyone seems to know where they're going. Everyone seems to know the rules. Everyone seems to know the destination. So, naturally, you start running too. But after a while, you begin to wonder, why am I running? Where is the finish line? Who decided this was a race? And perhaps the strangest part is this. No one ever asked if you wanted to join. Yet somehow, many of us spend our lives participating in a race we never agreed to enter. Now imagine two children. The first child learns to read at age 5. The second child learns at age 7. Does that mean one child will live a better life? Of course not. Yet adults often use a similar logic. Someone buys a house at 28. Someone else buys a house at 40. Someone gets married at 25. Someone else gets married at 50. Someone starts a business at 30. Someone starts a business at 60. Yet many people look at these differences and immediately create a ranking system. Ahead, behind, winning, losing, success, failure. Life becomes a scoreboard, and the pressure begins. Now think about school. From a young age, we become familiar with comparison. Grades, test scores, class rankings, performance reviews, competition. We learn to measure ourselves constantly. At first, perhaps this helps. It encourages effort, growth, improvement. But something else happens too. We begin to associate our value with our position. Not who we are, but where we stand. And that habit often follows us into adulthood. Now imagine two trees growing in the same forest. One tree grows quickly. Its branches stretch high into the sky. The other grows slowly. Year after year, season after season. If trees thought like humans, perhaps the smaller tree would become anxious. Why am I not as tall? Why am I growing so slowly? What's wrong with me? But nature doesn't work that way. The oak does not compare itself to the pine. The pine does not compare itself to the maple. Each grows according to its own nature, its own conditions, its own timing. Yet people often forget this lesson. Now imagine standing in a train station. Several trains arrive. One train leaves immediately. Another leaves in 30 minutes. Another leaves in 2 hours. Would you panic because your train has not left yet? Probably not. You understand something important. Different trains follow different schedules. Yet many people panic when life follows a different schedule. A friend gets promoted. Someone starts earning more money. Someone becomes fluent in English faster. Someone finds success earlier. And suddenly it feels like your train should have already left the station. But should it? Think about that. Now imagine two people learning English. The first student studies for 6 months. The second studies for 2 years. One speaks confidently. The other struggles. At first glance, it seems unfair, but then you learn something. The first student practices every day, speaks with native speakers, watches English videos constantly. The second student studies only once a week. The comparison changes immediately because context matters. Yet when we compare ourselves to others, we rarely see the full picture. We see the result, not the process. We see the destination, not the journey. Now imagine looking at a mountain. From a distance, you see someone standing near the top. What you don't see is the climb, the early mornings, the failures, the sacrifices, the years of effort. Many people compare their beginning to someone else's middle, or their middle to someone else's ending, and then they wonder why they feel discouraged. Imagine opening a book and reading page 200. You meet a successful character, confident, accomplished, respected. But you skip the first 199 pages. You miss the struggle, the mistakes, the setbacks, the doubts. Life comparisons often work exactly like that. We compare our page 20 to someone else's page 200, and then feel disappointed. Now let's think about social media for a moment. Imagine walking into a room where everyone displays their greatest achievement, their happiest memory, their best photograph, their proudest moment. That's what many online platforms become, a collection of highlights. But life is not a highlight reel. Life is also uncertainty, failure, boredom, confusion, ordinary days. The problem is not that people share happy moments. The problem is forgetting that those moments are only part of the story. Imagine watching a movie that contains only the final victory scene. No struggle, no challenge, no conflict, no growth. The story would make very little sense. Yet that is often how we view other people's lives. We see the ending and assume it was always that way. Now imagine a man carrying a backpack. Every time he compares himself to someone else, a stone appears inside the bag. One stone for comparison, one stone for envy, one stone for self-doubt, one stone for fear. At first, the weight seems small, barely noticeable. But day after day, year after year, the backpack becomes heavier. Eventually, the man begins to struggle. Not because life became harder, because the weight became greater. Many people carry a similar backpack, and they don't even realize it. Now here's something interesting. The fear of being left behind affects almost everyone. Students feel it. Employees feel it. Business owners feel it. Parents feel it. Retired people feel it. Even people who seem successful often feel it. Think about that. The person you envy may be looking at someone else and feeling exactly the same way. The race never ends, because there will always be someone faster, someone richer, someone younger, someone more successful, someone further ahead in some area of life. If your peace depends on being ahead of everyone else, peace becomes impossible. Now imagine running on a treadmill. You run faster, then faster, then faster. Yet no matter how hard you run, you remain in the same place. That is what comparison often feels like. More effort, more pressure, more anxiety, without greater peace. And perhaps that's because peace was never waiting at the finish line. Perhaps peace was never part of the race at all. Now think about your own life. Who are you trying to catch? Why? What happens if you reach them? What happens after that? Will there be another person ahead? Another goal? Another comparison? Another reason to feel behind? Think about that, because the fear of being left behind may not begin with life itself. It may begin with the belief that life is a race, and perhaps that belief deserves a closer look. Perhaps the fear of being left behind begins with a simple idea, a very common idea, a very human idea: comparison. Think about that. Most people don't wake up feeling behind. They wake up feeling normal. Then something happens. They see someone else's progress, someone else's success, someone else's achievement, and suddenly, their own life begins to feel smaller. Now imagine standing in a beautiful garden. Flowers are blooming everywhere. Red flowers, yellow flowers, blue flowers. Each flower is healthy. Each flower is growing. Each flower is exactly where it should be. Then imagine one flower looking at another and saying, "Why am I not blooming like that?" At that moment, something changes. The flower stops noticing its own growth and begins focusing only on the difference. Many people do the same thing. Now imagine two friends. Both begin learning English on the same day. The first friend studies because they enjoy learning. The second friend studies because they want to be better than everyone else. At first, both seem motivated, but over time, something happens. The first friend celebrates progress, every new word, every conversation, every improvement. The second friend celebrates only comparison. If I'm ahead, I'm happy. If I'm behind, I'm disappointed. One person enjoys the journey. The other turns the journey into a competition. Which person do you think is more likely to continue? Now imagine two hikers climbing different mountains. The first hiker occasionally looks around. They admire the scenery. They enjoy the experience. The second hiker spends the entire climb looking at another mountain. A taller mountain, a steeper mountain, a more impressive mountain. Eventually, the second hiker becomes discouraged. Not because their mountain changed, because their focus changed. How often does this happen in life? Think about that. Now let's talk about social media. Not because social media is bad, but because it changes something important. Imagine walking into a room. Inside that room, every person has selected one photograph. Just one. Their best photograph. Their happiest memory. Their proudest achievement. Their greatest success. That room would look impressive. Everyone would seem happy, confident, successful. But would that room tell the whole story? Of course not. You wouldn't see the failures, the lonely nights, the uncertainty, the setbacks, the mistakes. You would see the highlights, nothing more. Yet many people compare their entire lives to someone else's highlights, and then wonder why they feel inadequate. Now imagine watching the Olympic Games. You see an athlete standing on the podium, a gold medal around their neck, the crowd cheering, the cameras flashing. It's an incredible moment. But imagine seeing only that moment. You don't see the years of training, the injuries, the sacrifices, the mornings they wanted to quit, the competitions they lost, the doubts they faced. You see the result, not the story. Comparison often works exactly like that. We compare our struggles to someone else's success, our doubts to someone else's confidence, our beginning to someone else's destination. And then we judge ourselves unfairly. Now imagine a man standing in front of a mirror. Every day the mirror changes. One day it shows a millionaire. The next day it shows an athlete. The next day it shows a celebrity. The next day it shows a genius. Every morning the man compares himself to a different person. Would he ever feel satisfied? Probably not, because the target keeps moving. Comparison creates a game that cannot be won. There is always another mirror, another person, another standard, another reason to feel behind. Now imagine two brothers. One becomes a doctor. The other becomes a teacher. The doctor earns more money. The teacher changes hundreds of lives. Which brother is more successful? The answer depends on what you value. And that's the problem. Many people use someone else's definition of success, not their own. Imagine spending your entire life climbing a ladder, only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. How heartbreaking would that be? Yet it happens more often than we think. Now imagine a small river. The river flows quietly through a valley. It nourishes trees, provides water for animals, supports life everywhere it goes. Then one day the river looks at the ocean. The ocean is larger, more powerful, more impressive. The river begins feeling inadequate. But think about how strange that is. The river was never supposed to become an ocean. Its purpose was different. Its journey was different. Its role was different. Many people suffer because they forget this. They compare different journeys, different lives, different purposes, as if everyone is moving toward the same destination. Now imagine two clocks hanging on a wall. One clock is 5 minutes ahead. The other is 5 minutes behind. Does either clock become more valuable? Of course not. Yet many people treat life this way. He got married before me. She became successful before me. They bought a house before me. They learned English faster than me. As if timing alone determines value. But does it? Think about that. Now imagine an old man sitting beneath a tree. A young traveler approaches and asks, "How do I stop feeling behind?" The old man smiles, then points toward the forest. The traveler looks confused. The old man says, "Look carefully." The traveler notices something. Some trees are tall. Some are short. Some are young. Some are old. Yet none of them seem worried. None of them seem rushed. None of them seem concerned about the others. They simply grow, according to their nature, according to their season, according to their time. There is wisdom in that, perhaps more wisdom than we realize. Now think about your own life. How much of your stress comes from actual problems? And how much comes from comparison? How much comes from reality? And how much comes from the belief that you should be somewhere else by now? Think about that, because comparison does something dangerous. It makes us forget where we are and convinces us to focus only on where we are not. And perhaps that's where the fear begins. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering something surprising. There is no universal timeline for life, no official schedule, no master calendar, no invisible clock that every person must follow. And yet, many people live as if such a clock exists. They believe certain things should happen by a certain age. A career by 30, a house by 35, marriage by 40, financial success as soon as possible. And when life unfolds differently, the fear begins. I should be further ahead. Think about those words. How often have you said them, or thought them, or felt them? Perhaps more often than you realize. Now imagine two seeds planted on the same day. One becomes a sunflower. The other becomes an oak tree. After 3 months, the sunflower stands tall, bright, beautiful, visible from far away. The oak tree barely seems to have changed. If the oak tree could think like a human, it might become discouraged. What's wrong with me? Why am I growing so slowly? But what the oak tree cannot see is what is happening underground. Its roots are expanding, spreading, preparing. The sunflower grows quickly. The oak grows deeply. Both are growing, just differently. Life often works the same way. Now imagine two people graduating from university. The first person immediately finds a great job. Everything seems to fall into place. The second person struggles. Applications are rejected. Interviews fail. Months pass. Then years. At first glance, one story appears successful. The other appears disappointing. But life rarely ends after the first chapter. 10 years later, everything may look different. 20 years later, even more so. Yet many people judge their entire lives based on a temporary moment. A single chapter. A single season. A single year. Now imagine watching a movie and leaving after the first 15 minutes. One character appears lost, confused, directionless. You assume they will never succeed. But you never stay long enough to see the rest of the story. Many people do this with themselves. They decide too early. They judge too quickly. They assume today's situation is tomorrow's destiny. But is it? Think about that. Now imagine two clocks. One clock shows 8. The other shows 8:15. Does that mean one clock is superior? Of course not. They are simply showing different moments. Yet people constantly compare life as if timing determines worth. He became successful before me. She got married before me. They reached fluency faster than me. They bought a house before me. As if arriving earlier automatically means arriving better. But does it? Now imagine two travelers heading toward the same city. One takes a highway. The other takes a scenic route. The highway traveler arrives first. The scenic traveler arrives later. Does that mean one journey was correct and the other was wrong? Not at all. Different paths create different experiences, different lessons, different memories, different lives. Yet many people only care about arrival times. They never stop to ask whether they actually enjoy the road they're traveling. Now let's think about nature again. Winter never apologizes for arriving after autumn. Spring never rushes because summer is waiting. Every season arrives at the right moment. Not early, not late. Simply when it arrives. Imagine if spring spent all its time comparing itself to summer. Imagine if autumn worried about winter. Nature would become chaos. Yet people often live exactly this way. Always comparing. Always measuring. Always worrying about where they should be. Now imagine a man learning to play the piano. For the first year, progress feels slow. Very slow. Some days he feels like quitting. Then imagine another person. They hear him play after 5 years. The music sounds effortless, beautiful, natural. The listener says, "You're lucky." But was it luck? Or was it 5 years of invisible progress? Many people only see visible results. They never see invisible growth. The practice, the patience, the repetition, the persistence. And because of that, they misunderstand success. Now imagine two mountains. One mountain rises sharply from the earth. The other rises gradually, slowly, patiently. Both eventually reach great heights, but they take different routes, different shapes, different timelines. People often forget that growth can look very different. Some people bloom early, some bloom later. Some experience success young. Others find it in middle age. Some discover their purpose at 20. Others discover it at 60. Neither path is wrong. Now imagine a woman in her 40s. She decides to learn English. People around her say, "Isn't it too late?" But she continues. One lesson, then another, then another. A year later, she can have conversations. 3 years later, she can travel confidently. 5 years later, she helps others learn. What seemed impossible became possible. Not because she was ahead, because she kept going. Many dreams die because people believe they are behind. Not because the dream is impossible. Now imagine an elderly man planting a tree. A passerby laughs. "Why plant a tree now?" The man smiles, then says, "Because someone planted trees before I arrived." There is wisdom in that. Life is not only about reaching milestones. Sometimes it is about contributing, growing, learning, living, regardless of age, regardless of timing. Now let's go a little deeper. Why are we so obsessed with timing? Perhaps because timing feels measurable, easy to compare, easy to understand. But the most important things in life often cannot be measured so easily. Kindness, wisdom, character, resilience, peace, gratitude. There are no rankings for these things, no scoreboard, no finish line, and yet they may matter more than anything else. Now imagine standing in a forest one final time. Hundreds of trees surround you. Some are young, some are ancient, some are growing quickly, some are growing slowly. Yet together they create something beautiful. Not because they are identical, because they are different. Perhaps human lives are similar. Perhaps the beauty comes not from everyone following the same timeline, but from each person following their own. Now think about your own life. Whose clock are you following? Who decided the timeline you're measuring yourself against? And what would happen if you stopped comparing your season to someone else's? Think about that. Because perhaps the problem is not that you're behind. Perhaps the problem is that you're measuring your life with someone else's clock. And perhaps it's time to put that clock down. Imagine carrying a backpack. At first it feels light, comfortable, easy to carry. You barely notice it's there. Then someone places a small stone inside. The stone is called comparison. A little later, another stone appears. The stone is called self-doubt. Then another. Fear. Then another. Anxiety. Then another. Pressure. Year after year, the backpack becomes heavier. Yet because the weight increases gradually, you hardly notice it until one day you're exhausted and you don't understand why. Many people live exactly this way. The fear of being left behind is not just an uncomfortable feeling. It has a cost, a hidden cost, a cost that accumulates over time. Think about that. Now imagine two employees working at the same company. The first employee focuses on improving, learning, growing, doing meaningful work. The second employee constantly compares. Who received the promotion? Who earns more money? Who has the better office? Who gets more recognition? At first, both employees work equally hard, but something begins to happen. The second employee carries an extra burden. Every success becomes a comparison. Every achievement becomes a competition. Every victory feels temporary, because someone else always seems to be doing better. Eventually, work becomes exhausting, not because of the work itself, because of the emotional weight attached to it. Now imagine two runners. The first runner focuses on the road ahead. The second runner keeps looking sideways every few seconds, checking other runners, comparing speed, comparing distance, comparing progress. Who do you think becomes tired first? Who is more likely to stumble? Sometimes the distraction is more damaging than the challenge itself. Now think about social media again. Imagine scrolling through hundreds of photographs, beautiful vacations, perfect families, luxury homes, career achievements, smiling faces, exciting adventures, hour after hour, day after day, month after month. What happens? Slowly, your perception changes. Your ordinary life begins to feel inadequate. Your normal day begins to feel boring. Your steady progress begins to feel insignificant. But has your life actually changed? No, only the comparison changed. And yet the emotional impact feels very real. Now imagine drinking salt water. At first, it seems harmless. But the more you drink, the thirstier you become. Comparison often works the same way. We think it will satisfy us, motivate us, push us forward. But often, it creates more dissatisfaction, more frustration, more longing. No matter how much progress we make, there is always someone ahead, someone richer, someone smarter, someone more successful, someone younger, someone more attractive, someone with something we don't have. The thirst never ends. Now imagine a man standing at the bottom of a mountain. His goal is to enjoy the climb, to appreciate the view, to grow stronger. But halfway up the mountain, he notices another climber. That climber is higher. Immediately, everything changes. The scenery disappears. The gratitude disappears. The joy disappears. Now there is only comparison, only measurement, only pressure. The mountain didn't change. The experience did. How often does this happen in life? Now imagine a woman learning English. At first, she feels excited. Every new word feels like progress. Every lesson feels rewarding. Then she meets someone who speaks more fluently. Suddenly, her own progress feels smaller. She begins questioning herself. Maybe I'm too slow. Maybe I'm not talented enough. Maybe I'll never get there. But think about what's happening. Her English improved. Her knowledge increased. Her skills grew. The only thing that changed was the comparison. And yet her motivation begins to disappear. This is the hidden cost. Comparison doesn't just steal happiness. It steals momentum. Now imagine a child drawing a picture. The child is completely absorbed, focused, creative, happy. Then another child walks by and draws something more impressive. Immediately, doubt appears. The first child begins judging, comparing, questioning. The joy of creating disappears. Many adults experience the same thing. Not with drawings, with careers, relationships, money, fitness, education, life itself. Now imagine driving a car while constantly looking in the rearview mirror. Would it be safe? Of course not. Yet many people spend years looking backward. comparing themselves to people from school, old classmates, former co-workers, friends from the past, people they haven't spoken to in years. Their attention remains fixed somewhere else. And because of that, they struggle to move forward. Now let's go deeper. The fear of being left behind creates something else: impatience. Imagine planting a seed. The seed begins growing, slowly, naturally. But because you see another person's tree, you become frustrated. You begin digging up the seed every day, checking for progress, demanding faster growth. The irony is that impatience often damages the very thing we're trying to grow. This happens with careers, relationships, businesses, language learning, personal development. The more desperately we demand immediate results, the harder it becomes to appreciate steady progress. Now imagine two business owners. The first focuses on serving customers, improving products, building something valuable. The second spends all day studying competitors, comparing numbers, comparing revenue, comparing growth. Years later, one business is thriving. The other is exhausted, not because of competition, because of obsession. Many people become trapped in the same cycle. They stop living their lives and begin monitoring everyone else's. Now imagine carrying a compass. A compass has one purpose: to help you find your direction. But what happens if you spend all your time staring at someone else's compass? You lose sight of your own path. And perhaps that is the greatest cost of feeling behind. Not stress, not anxiety, not frustration. Although all of those matter, the greatest cost is losing connection with your own journey, your own values, your own goals, your own definition of success. Now think about your own life. How much energy have you spent worrying about being behind? How many hours? How many days? How many years? And what could you have built with that energy instead? What skills could you have learned? What relationships could you have strengthened? What experiences could you have enjoyed? Think about that, because the fear of being left behind often becomes the very thing holding us back. And perhaps the people who seem the most at peace have discovered something important. They are no longer looking sideways. They are looking forward. And that changes everything. Imagine someone you envy. Perhaps it's a friend, a coworker, a classmate, a business owner, a celebrity, someone who seems to have everything figured out. Now imagine spending a single day in their life. Not the version they show the world. The real version. The complete version. What do you think you would discover? Perhaps something surprising. Because every life looks different from the inside. Think about that. Most envy is built on incomplete information. We see a chapter and assume we know the entire book. We see the stage and assume we know what happened backstage. But life is rarely that simple. Now imagine standing in front of a mountain. From one side, the mountain looks perfect, majestic, beautiful, almost magical. But walk around the mountain, and you'll discover something else. Steep cliffs, loose rocks, difficult terrain, shadows. Every mountain has another side. So does every life. Yet comparison often allows us to see only one side. The attractive side, the successful side, the visible side. And because of that, our comparisons become distorted. Now imagine two men. One drives an expensive car. The other drives an old vehicle. From the outside, the first man appears successful. The second man appears ordinary. But what if the first man is drowning in debt? What if he barely sleeps at night? What if stress follows him everywhere? And what if the second man enjoys peace, strong relationships, good health, a meaningful life? Who is truly ahead? The answer suddenly becomes less obvious. Now imagine attending a reunion. You meet people you haven't seen in years. One person became wealthy. Another built a successful business. Another travels constantly. Another seems to have the perfect family. At first, it feels like everyone succeeded. Everyone except you. Then the conversations begin. One person is struggling with loneliness. Another is facing health problems. Another feels trapped in a career they no longer enjoy. Another is overwhelmed by responsibility. And suddenly, the picture changes. Success is still there, but so are struggles. The truth is rarely visible from a distance. Now imagine watching a theater performance. The audience sees confidence, perfection, professionalism. Everything appears effortless. What they don't see are the rehearsals, the mistakes, the stress, the failures, the uncertainty, the countless hours spent preparing. Life often works exactly the same way. Most people see the performance. Very few see the preparation. Now think about social media again. Imagine a person posting a photograph from a beautiful vacation. The ocean is perfect. The sunset is beautiful. Everything looks peaceful. But the photograph lasts 1 second. What about the rest of the day? The worries, the challenges, the responsibilities waiting at home? None of those appear in the picture. The image is real, but it is incomplete. And incomplete information creates misleading comparisons. Now imagine a successful business owner. People admire the company, the revenue, the achievements, the freedom, but they never see the years of uncertainty, the sleepless nights, the financial risks, the moments when failure seemed likely. Many people want the outcome. Few people want the journey that created it. Now imagine two icebergs floating in the ocean. Above the surface, one iceberg appears larger, more impressive, more beautiful. But beneath the surface lies something unseen. Depth, structure, weight. Most of the iceberg remains hidden. Human lives are similar. What you see is only a small fraction of the story. The visible part, the hidden part often matters much more. Now imagine a young man scrolling through his phone late at night. Photograph after photograph. Success story after success story. Achievement after achievement. Slowly, he begins to feel behind. But imagine if each photograph came with complete honesty. One image might say, "I received a promotion today, but I've been exhausted for years." Another might say, "I bought this house, but I'm constantly worried about money." Another might say, "Everyone thinks I'm confident, but I struggle with anxiety every day." How differently would we compare? Perhaps we wouldn't compare at all. Now imagine a king, powerful, respected, admired. Thousands envy his position. Yet the king cannot trust many people around him. He feels isolated, suspicious, alone. Now imagine a farmer, simple life, modest income, strong friendships, deep relationships, a sense of purpose. Who is happier? Who is richer? Who is truly ahead? These questions are harder than they first appear, because life cannot be measured by a single number. Now think about someone you've envied in the past. Perhaps a person from school. Perhaps a former coworker. Perhaps someone online. What do you actually know about their life? Not the visible part. The complete story. Probably less than you think. And that realization matters. Because comparison depends on certainty. It depends on believing we know enough to judge. But we rarely do. Now imagine reading only the cover of a book. Would you claim to understand the story? Would you confidently review the plot? Of course not. Yet many people compare entire lives based on tiny glimpses. A photograph, a job title, a salary, a relationship status, a moment, nothing more. Now here's something worth remembering. The people you envy are human, just like you. They experience fear, doubt, disappointment, failure, loneliness, uncertainty, just like you. The details may differ. The struggles may differ. But no life is free from challenge. No life is perfect. No life is complete without difficulty. Think about that. Because perhaps the person you envy is fighting a battle you cannot see. Perhaps they are carrying a burden you would never choose. Perhaps they are looking at someone else and feeling exactly the same way. And perhaps the life you envy is not the life you imagine it to be. Now think about your own life. What would happen if you stopped looking at other people's highlights? What would happen if you stopped assuming their story is better? What would happen if you focused on understanding your own journey instead? Because comparison often begins with illusion, and peace often begins with clarity. Think about that for a moment, because once we stop idealizing other people's lives, something remarkable becomes possible. We can finally begin appreciating our own. Imagine that one morning you stop running. Not forever, just for a moment. You stop comparing. You stop measuring. You stop checking where everyone else is. And instead, you look at your own path. What do you see? For many people, that moment feels uncomfortable. Because comparison has become a habit. A habit so familiar that they no longer notice it. Think about that. Imagine walking through a forest. There are dozens of paths. Some are wide. Some are narrow. Some are steep. Some are easy. Now imagine constantly leaving your path to follow someone else's. A few minutes later, you see another person. Their path looks better. So you switch again. Then another path appears. And another. And another. Eventually, you become exhausted. Not because the forest is difficult, because you never commit to a direction. Many people live this way, always looking sideways, always wondering if someone else's path is better. And because of that, they never fully experience their own. Now imagine a compass. A compass has one simple purpose. It helps you find direction. But imagine comparing your compass to everyone else's. This person's compass looks newer. That person's compass looks more expensive. Their direction seems more exciting. At some point, you forget the purpose of the compass entirely. Its purpose was never comparison. Its purpose was guidance. The same is true for life. Your goals should guide you, not imprison you. Now imagine two travelers. The first traveler constantly asks, "Am I ahead of everyone else?" The second traveler asks, "Am I moving in the right direction?" At first, the questions sound similar, but they lead to very different lives. The first traveler is obsessed with position. The second traveler is focused on purpose. Position changes constantly. Purpose lasts much longer. Now think about a river. The river never asks, "Why is that river wider than me? Why is that river faster than me? Why is that river more beautiful than me?" The river simply flows, day after day, season after season, toward its destination. There is something peaceful about that, perhaps because the river understands something many people forget. Its job is not to be every river. Its job is to be itself. Now imagine a musician. At first, the musician plays because they love music. Then they begin comparing themselves to other musicians. Soon, every song becomes a competition. Every performance becomes a measurement. The joy begins to disappear. The music hasn't changed, but the relationship with the music has. How many dreams suffer the same fate? How many passions become burdens because comparison enters the room? Think about that. Now imagine an elderly man sitting beside a lake. A young traveler approaches and asks, "How do I stop feeling behind?" The old man smiles, then asks a question. "Behind whom?" The traveler pauses. The old man continues, "Who exactly are you trying to catch?" The traveler cannot answer, and perhaps that's because most people never ask themselves that question. They simply run, without knowing why, without knowing toward what, without knowing for whom. Now imagine spending 20 years climbing a ladder. Every day you work harder. Climb higher. Push further. Then one day you reach the top and realize something. The ladder led somewhere you never wanted to go. How many people spend years chasing goals they never truly chose? Goals inherited from society, from family, from culture, from comparison, not from themselves. Walking your own path begins with asking an important question. What do I actually want? Not what impresses others. Not what looks successful online. Not what society celebrates. What matters to you? Now imagine two gardens. One garden grows roses. The other grows vegetables. Would it make sense for the roses to envy the tomatoes? Would it make sense for the tomatoes to envy the roses? Of course not. They serve different purposes. Yet people constantly compare completely different lives. A teacher compares themselves to an entrepreneur. An artist compares themselves to an executive. A parent compares themselves to a traveler. Someone in their 20s compares themselves to someone in their 50s. The comparisons rarely make sense, yet they still create suffering. Now imagine standing at the edge of a forest trail. There is no crowd, no competition, no finish line, just a path. Your path. The path may be slower than someone else's. It may be different. It may take unexpected turns, but it belongs to you. And perhaps that matters more than speed. Now think about the moments in your life when you felt most fulfilled. Not most impressive, not most admired, most fulfilled. Perhaps it was a conversation, a friendship, a lesson learned, a challenge overcome, a quiet moment of gratitude. Notice something. Many meaningful moments have nothing to do with being ahead of anyone else. They simply have to do with being present. Now imagine putting down a heavy backpack. The backpack you've carried for years. The backpack filled with comparison, pressure, expectation, fear. At first it feels strange. You've carried it for so long. It feels like part of you. But after a while, something changes. You walk more freely. You breathe more easily. You notice things you missed before. The beauty of your own path. The progress you've already made. The life you're already living. Now think about your own life. What if you stopped measuring your journey against everyone else's? What if you stopped asking, "Am I ahead?" and started asking, "Am I growing?" What if you stopped asking, "Am I winning?" and started asking, "Am I becoming the person I want to become?" Those questions lead somewhere very different. Now here's the final thought. A flower does not worry about the flower beside it. A river does not compete with another river. The moon does not rush to become the sun. Each follows its own path, its own purpose, its own timing. Perhaps peace begins when we do the same. Perhaps the fear of being left behind disappears the moment we realize something important. Life was never a race. It was always a journey. And journeys are not measured by who arrives first. They are measured by how fully we live along the way. Think about that for a moment, and perhaps for much longer. Before we finish, I'd like you to imagine something. Imagine that all comparisons disappear for just one day. No social media, no rankings, no timelines, no measuring, no checking where everyone else is. Just one day. How would you feel? Would you still believe you're behind? Think about that, because much of what we call being behind exists only in comparison. Now imagine waking up on a small island. You are the only person there. There are no neighbors, no coworkers, no classmates, no strangers, no social media, no competition, no one to compare yourself to. Would you still feel behind? Behind whom? The question suddenly becomes difficult to answer. And perhaps that's important, because many people spend years trying to solve a problem that comparison created in the first place. Now imagine a man running through a forest. He has been running for years. Faster, harder, further, always chasing someone ahead. Eventually, he becomes exhausted. So exhausted that he finally stops. For the first time in years, he looks around, and something surprises him. The forest is beautiful. The sunlight is warm. The birds are singing. The path beneath his feet is peaceful. All these things existed before. He simply never noticed them, because he was too busy running. How many beautiful things have we missed because we were focused on catching someone else? Think about that. Now imagine you're 80 years old. You are sitting quietly, looking back on your life. What do you think will matter most? Will you remember who earned more money? Who got promoted first? Who bought a house earlier? Who learned faster? Perhaps not. More likely, you'll remember moments, people, experiences, conversations, acts of kindness, acts of courage, the moments that made life meaningful. And most of those moments have very little to do with comparison. Now imagine two books. The first book is very long, filled with adventures, challenges, growth. The second book is shorter, different, unique, meaningful in its own way. Which book is better? The question doesn't really make sense. Books are not valuable because they are identical. They are valuable because they tell different stories. Human lives are no different. Now think about all the people you admire. Not envy. Admire. People whose lives inspire you. What qualities do they possess? Kindness? Wisdom? Courage? Patience? Compassion? Notice something. The qualities we admire most often have nothing to do with being ahead. They have everything to do with character. And character grows at its own pace. Now imagine a flower blooming in a field. The flower does not wake up and ask, "Am I blooming faster than the others?" It blooms when it is ready. The sun rises when it is time. The seasons change when they are time. Nature seems remarkably unconcerned with comparison. And perhaps there is wisdom in that. Now imagine carrying two clocks. One clock belongs to you. The other belongs to someone else. For years, you keep looking at the second clock, measuring yourself against it, judging yourself by it, feeling anxious because of it. Then one day you put it down. You keep only your own clock, your own journey, your own timeline, your own path. Nothing outside changes, yet everything feels different. Why? Because peace often begins when comparison ends. Now think about your own life. How much progress have you ignored? How many victories have you overlooked? How many lessons have you learned? How many challenges have you overcome? How many times have you kept going when it would have been easier to quit? Those things matter, perhaps far more than you realize. Now imagine meeting your younger self, the version of you from 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even 1 year ago. What would that person think of who you've become? Would they see only your shortcomings? Or would they notice your growth, your resilience, your strength, your experience? Sometimes we are so focused on how far we still have to go that we forget how far we've already come. Think about that for a moment. Now imagine standing at the beginning of a long path, a path that belongs only to you. No one else can walk it. No one else can live it. No one else can become who you are meant to become. There will always be people ahead in some areas, and behind in others. That will never change. But perhaps that was never the point. Perhaps the point was never to be ahead. Perhaps the point was to be present, to grow, to learn, to love, to contribute, to experience life fully, in your own way, at your own pace. Now here's the final thought. A river does not compare itself to another river. A tree does not compete with another tree. The stars do not race across the night sky. Each simply follows its nature, its purpose, its path. And perhaps the same is true for us. You do not need someone else's timeline. You do not need someone else's success. You do not need someone else's life. You only need the courage to live your own. So the next time you feel behind, pause for a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself one simple question. Behind whom? The answer may change everything. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember, you are not late. You are not behind. You are simply on your own path. And see you in the next story.